Just for some reason, I get them confused.
I get that mixed up with another game that's completely irrelevant and has nothing in common with it.
Mm-hmm.
I spelled complex with a K.
Yeah, of course.
Of course you did.
What a...
Oh no, I'm buying into my own hype.
Gonna make it big.
AM Comnenos doesn't work out, then complex with a K could
I just simplify it for everyone. Change my
Complicated.
fucking name.
be like Sade complex.
Sade. There's a note in music, the 2 or the add 9, which is used so commonly in Sade songs that amongst musicians you sometimes call it the Sade note. Despite it being a really, really common note, it's just all over Sade stuff.
The baby making note.
She's just really good.
That's the only thing I know about Sade's music. People bang to it. That's it.
Smooth operator, hell yeah I am. I'm definitely listening to that right now. Oh, sweetest taboo, let's go.
That's the topic. Video games to bang to.
Oh, I love how the implication is there's probably, but not necessarily, 3 people in the room, minimum.
Yeah. Somebody has to play the game while this is happening.
Before we begin, the Gamers Advocate would like to remind you that any episode could contain game spoilers, so watch or listen with discretion. And now your hosts, AM Comnenos, Banana and Legion. Enjoy the show.
So, in addition to your core companions, you do have the option to recruit a few others, which I greatly appreciated because I don't think there's enough companions. Even though there's tons of story, and unlike Baldur's Gate 1 and really even Baldur's Gate 2 for most of the companions, there's not a lot there. You can have them. It's a canon you make in your head. It's a story you make in your head. Whether you're talking about Jaheira, whether you're talking about Viconia, whether you're talking about, we talked about Garrick earlier, whoever it's going to be, really, they have a story, but most of them fall short of it being anything.
Yeah. I think with most of the Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 companions, they have a story that ends before the main story ends. And when you get to the companions in Baldur's Gate 3, overwhelmingly, they are all tied to the main story. They have their own story in support of that, but the conclusion of the main story is important to them as well. So there's a reason for them to be involved. You don't see that with every companion in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. They have their own little arc, and when that's resolved, they almost stay with you out of loyalty to you rather than genuine concerns of the main events.
Yeah, and then of course they can leave you if the alignment's too strict for them.
Yeah.
Which, and that's where we kind of get into the companions here, because it's like they kind of threw them in almost in that style, that Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, to where there's a story there. We've already kind of completed our thing, but we're going to still hang out with you for loyalty purposes. And I don't love that. I don't really love that. I appreciate the fact that they gave them to me. It's better than nothing. The type of characters we are talking about should have a deep story. They should. Maybe not the original companions, because you know they're going to be Act 1, 2, and 3. I get that. But I think someone like Halsin deserves a deep story, and he doesn't get one. Most he's known for is turning into a bear that you can have relations with.
Yeah, that's his claim to fame. I will say, I think the story he does get in Act 2 is very interesting. It's very engaging. It's something I want to play through, and it's very much the I mean, I think the fact that we're talking about Halsin means that we're talking about spoilers. So Halsin's story is directly tied to the shadow curse that covers the area that you have to navigate in Act 2. And I think that is probably... The story is interesting, but the story feels underdone to me. Maybe it's just because you deal with the shadow curse for the entirety of Act 2, but his story feels like a brief part of it. It really feels like underdeveloped, because Halsin ultimately feels responsible for the existence of the shadow curse. He takes it as his responsibility to rectify that situation, and you kind of get that in passing. And all of this is before he even joins you as a companion. So that's even worse. The fact that he's not alongside you as you're dealing with the shadow curse, the fact that he's not leaving the camp to experience it himself, it just feels wrong.
Yeah, I think he should be immediately recruitable once you get to Act 2, because then it would set the stage of you being able to lay the groundwork necessary to have those conversations. You just can't. He's just there.
It also just makes sense. You talk to him in Act 1, he's like, I need to get to Moonrise Towers. And you're like, yeah, so do I. Okay, I'll join you. The end. That's all it took. He is just now a companion who will work with you to deal with the stuff going on surrounding Moonrise Towers.
And I could kind of understand if for lore reasons that you can't have someone like Jaheira or Halsin who were in the fight against Ketheric. But would Ketheric really even recognize them? I mean, I'm not so sure. I have nothing to indicate to me that Ketheric can remember specific people that he fought against in that fight. I found nothing in the game that would tell me that. So,
and honestly, like, if he fought against them, I don't know that there's really a lower reason they can't fight against him again. But, like, even for him to recognize them.
When you first meet him and he has that trial thing, if you're whatever. I'm saying when you meet him at the three, exactly. Yeah. Before the fight. So you would say, wait a minute, I know you.
Yeah, to blow your cover.
Yeah, exactly.
Although there's a disguise self spell in the game.
Sure.
You can
put that on Halsin.
Just have Halsin and Jaheira, like, yeah, and a bear form. You could just have them confront you at the gates of Moonrise and be like, maybe it's best if I disguise myself or you go in with different companions. That's a simple, quick fix.
No, that was my uncle Halsin in there.
I just have one of those faces, you know.
No. I mean, like I said, I think it would be fine. I don't know if they had a lore reason why they didn't do it. It's just I think it was. Just didn't think they did. But I don't like it. I think he should be immediately recruitable from the beginning, especially by the time you get to Last Light. Because at that point, it would really be nice to have him in that fight scene.
It's also really. From a gameplay standpoint, and not even like a storytelling or a lore standpoint, it's also really inconvenient that you don't get a druid in Act 1. You get 2 druids at the end of Act 2. Like, why are we dumping druids on me with just a third of the game to go?
Which this is the part that I was going with when you took the words right out of my mouth. It's like you have too much at one time, the concentration. But if you went into the Druid Grove and let's say you sided with the Shadow Druids and you could recruit Korga instead of Halsin. Now you're bringing Korga into Act 2, which I think that would be great because she's a Shadow Druid. And and I've said this before, unlike popular opinion about the Shadow Druids, because if all you know is Baldur's Gate 3, there's nothing wrong with the Shadow Druids per se. They're evil aligned, but they protect the forest. That's their
There's nothing wrong with the Shadow Druids as they're introduced in Baldur's Gate 1. They become a perversion of themselves as they progress. And you see that, well, yeah, in Baldur's Gate 2, they're in that kind of moral gray area. In Baldur's Gate 1, they are completely justified. In Baldur's Gate 2, it's like, all right, now you're kind of falling into the same thing you're accusing others of. You're over expanding. And then by the time you get to Baldur's Gate 3, they're like, let's kill everyone. You're like, all right, you are not the Shadow Druids that I knew.
But let's remove the story of Baldur's Gate 3 and just say we don't know there's going to be a group of heroes that are going to be protected from the absolutes, indoctrination of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know this. The Shadow Druids just know that something is coming and there's nothing stopping it. We need to protect our people. That's all they did.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong
that is true.
with what they did.
Reading through the correspondence between Kaga and Oladan, you see that like they understand there's a threat at Moonrise. Their goal is to protect the Grove, and Kaga's justification is that protection extends only to druids. We need to get the tieflings out of here and protect ourselves. And she never really reveals that the reason they're doing the Rite of Sylvanas is because of that threat at Moonrise. But when you read through those correspondence between the two, you realize like that's why she has this sense of urgency. So even when you understand that full story, the Shadow Druids, they return to that kind of neutral state. They're not inherently evil, but they're not going out and attacking Moonrise. They're not trying to save the world. They're just protecting their grove. They do lean towards the evil in that, like, we offered these people protection. We should just include them here when we invoke the Rite of Sylvanas and essentially teach them what it is to be druids, because the alternative is they die. So like they're definitely kind of bordering that evil alignment in that moment, but they're far more understandable than I think the majority of the Baldur's Gate 3 audience would see them as. So like I agree with you. I think if BG3 is your only introduction to the Shadow Druids, you probably think they're an evil group who's dead set on seeking power and enforcing their will on others, when they are mostly an isolationist group.
They're very understandable. It's very relatable. They're not, I don't think, doing anything maliciously. I think that they are trying to preserve what they can, because again, they don't know there's some force out there that can counteract this. They know about fighting Moonrise. They have it up on their little plaques in the underground grove area. So they know about the history of Moonrise. They know what they're capable of doing, and this is what they're trying to prevent against. Makes sense. It's not coming from a position of ignorance. So, like I said, if you could choose to bring Korga because you side with the Shadow Druids in this situation, I think that would be also pretty interesting. We don't have that option. She's not a companion, but I do think that she would be very capable, not too much different from Halsin.
I also think there would be an interesting development there of Koga as a Shadow Druid, traveling through the Shadow Cursed lands and thinking maybe Shadow's not so great. This place kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And I think there's definitely that option to further develop that character, and with the main character's guidance, kind of shape them in one of two directions, to say that like, yeah, Shadow is power, so that explains why the Shadow Druids are the way that they are, or Shadow is usually a manifestation of evil.
But she could also see the Shadow for what it is, because when you have the child that Halsin is there to help fix, Korga could very similarly say, you don't belong in this form. This is not, this form does not belong to you. You've been perverted into the Shadow. So she would recognize the Shadow for what it is. So there's a lot of ways you could do that. But again, this isn't about Korga.
Yeah.
I mean, it's supposed to be about Halsin, but that's the problem, is that there's not a ton of story about Halsin.
Yeah. I also feel like that presents a decision at the end of that, when if Kaga is there with you, for her to say that like, this needs to be purged, and her solution is to kill that corrupted child. And I feel like that leans into the way Baldur's Gate has always been, where there's kind of that evil way to go about completing a quest. And I feel like that this gives you that option. It's not an option I want, but it's an option that probably makes the game more complete.
Yeah. It's like I said, I don't see anything hurting it if that's the way they went. But I think Halsin is a interesting character. I really like taking him into Act 3. He's got a lot to say about the city of Baldur's Gate. He has, some lore dumps here and there that I wouldn't have gotten. Just like I wouldn't have think that he would know, but he's so old and he knows a lot. He's seen a lot, and so he's able to kind of give you a perspective that maybe the Baldurians don't have. So it's pretty neat. I like him.
I think again there is that issue with gameplay where like I don't bring Halsin around that much in Act 3, especially because as a druid, primarily a shape-shifting focused druid, he feels inappropriate for the end game because Act 3 you're getting all sorts of incredible gear, and not much of that gear really impacts shape-shifting. So Halsin is still very much in that, like, it would be great in Act 1, but he kind of falls off in terms of performance in Act 3. And you've also gotten another druid who is not shape-shifting focused.
Let me tell you the scenario where I actually bring him all the time. Where I play as a druid. And I have an almost all druid party. I have Jaheira, myself, Halsin, and maybe Astarion, I think. And it really is interesting. It's a really great dynamic. It's more of a canon in my head what's going on, because you would think there would be these three druids bantering and Astarion. And it's like, but that doesn't happen, but it happens in my head, and that's good enough,
Yeah, I do think that's one of the reasons I love the fact that you can play these on variable difficulty. Is the only way you're going to get those interactions between Jaheira and Halsin is if your party is not built for min-maxing. Like unless you respec everybody and then they're not really even the same character anymore, like you're not going to get certain character interactions because those characters overlap too much in terms of what they provide. But if you drop the difficulty down, you can bypass that. You can get around it, and it's not as big a deal. So I love that that's there, so you can get those experiences. Because ultimately, what you really want is all of those character interactions, because they're all at camp anyway. Like, they're talking to each other.
Yeah, because we're talking about min-maxing, but in the original Baldur's Gate 1 or 2 specifically, if you had somebody like Baldur in Baldur's Gate 1 and then a High Druid in Baldur's Gate 2, they have some of the best spells against mages in the game, or none. You said summon insects or whatever.
Yeah, that'll shut down a group of mages. It's wonderful.
Yeah, plague, and because they can't get their spells off. They can't, then they're just ready to get hit. So druids in the original one. That's why, like I said, it's an all druid party. I mean, should be overpowering. It's not how it works, but I mean, that's only because of the balancing features in Rule 5. But in the more strict rule set in 2.5 and I guess 3, druids kind of like own the stage there. But anyway, like I said, with Halsin, he's got a lot of interesting things to say there, but I wouldn't say he's invaluable. So. But he's interesting as a character. He's huge. I thought they would just make a regular elf character, right? But he's massive, and he's got like some weird lore reason, like I'm just the way I've always been, just how it is, Some trees grow real big, and who's to say why one grows 20 feet taller than the other? Who knows? Next companion, we could talk about. Guess could be Jaheira. Might as well.
Yep.
Yeah, because they kind of go. The funny thing about Jaheira is that I had known before the game came out that she would be. They try to keep it hush hush, but once I saw Jaheira, I was like, she's gonna be a companion. She's got to be. She's kind of like Liara of Mass Effect. She's gonna be a companion.
Who wasn't a companion in Mass Effect 2.
Yeah, right. But I was like, there's gotta be. She's gotta be. I mean,
yeah, I definitely figured she would play a big role. I don't know if I was confident she'd be a companion. I'm glad that she is. I think Baldur's Gate 3 made me appreciate that character so much more, because I found her a bit too abrasive in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. She was supremely interesting in Baldur's Gate 2, because unfortunately there was that tragedy at the very beginning, and watching her deal with that made for a very engaging story. But seeing her character in Baldur's Gate 3 made me want to go back and replay the originals with her in my party, because she is a really wonderful character in Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, the Jaheira that we get is a little bit older, and I do think Larian got her right as far as the age and how she looks and whatnot, because she wasn't particularly young in the Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. She wasn't old. She was more like, I guess, middle-aged maybe. She is a half-elf, so. But when we look at when you get her, of course, it's at the end of Act 2, and it's another one of those, it makes sense from a lore standpoint, storytelling standpoint, but it would have been kind of neat from the very beginning of Last Light In to, she's there to protect the people. I get that, but nothing's going on. There's nothing she can do. It would kind of seem to me that she'd want to keep a close eye on you, and that means being in your party and your camp.
Yep. I think, especially with the fact that they are both druids, you have that outlet of shape-shifting. There's no reason for them not to be in your party at the beginning of Act 2. So, like, if you try to enter Moonrise and they don't want to be discovered, they have the ability to change form. And then you're just like, yeah, I have a spider companion. I have a bear companion. Mind your business.
Yeah. A badger. It's just a badger. It's just a big old badger. But no, I think she's another one of those lore dump stories that makes sense once you know about the events in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and her involvement. Bringing her to Baldur's Gate in Act 3, get the hiccups, in Act 3, when you take her to the city, her story just gets better and better and better.
Mm-hmm.
She's definitely one of those that you need to, at some point, have Jaheira in your party and do her stuff. And it's really neat, really interesting. It's not a massive amount of information, but I can appreciate it because, again, coming from Baldur's Gate 1, Baldur's Gate 2, and if you didn't know, you could romance her in Baldur's Gate 2, even though she was married in Baldur's Gate 1. So, and so there's...
I think even that is consistent with what you get in Baldur's Gate 3, because she's very much I'm going to live a lot longer. I don't have to be alone just because I was married. And then, yeah, it just makes a lot of sense. It's been 100 years since Baldur's Gate 2. Like, okay, I'm gonna give you a pass on this one if you found a new romance after 100 years.
Yeah, and then there is some little tidbits that you'll find in her, not in her story, but in where the story takes you with her.
Yep.
Anyway, to direct references to 1 and 2, it's really good. Unlike what my criticism was with Viconia. You know, Viconia, if you romanced her,
nobody's happy.
There should be something there, but there's nothing there.
I feel like we've talked about this before, but in Baldur's Gate 2, you can change Viconia's alignment, and her appearance in Baldur's Gate 3 gives you a canon that never happened, and I don't like that.
I don't like it because mainly it makes no reference to a possible major story tie to Baldur's Gate 2 that's not inconsistent with the bigger picture, the lore. Mm-hmm. Viconia, I'm more satisfied thinking that Viconia is some kind of like simulacrum or something than her actually being Viconia, because this is not Viconia. Whereas Jaheira, there's a lot of
think that would make a lot more sense because Viconia is old. That's not a thing. She's not supposed to be. So I just love the idea that no, this is like a magical copy. This is a doppelganger who's gotten something wrong, and that's why she is this faulty version of Viconia that we knew.
Yeah. But conversely, I think that they did get Jaheira right. I was like, well, they spent all this time getting Jaheira right. What happened?
Yeah.
And I guess that's all I got to say about Jaheira, because like I said, without going into spoilers or deep into her story, I do think that she is consistent with the original games. And so I can respect that. And they didn't have to include some of those things, but they did.
I also think her kind of like settling in Baldur's Gate, building a life there, holding on to some artifacts of her adventures from Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. I think that's a really kind of satisfying explanation for what she's been doing for the last 100 years.
Yeah.
I think her appearance in Baldur's Gate 3 was something I didn't know I wanted, and then when I got it, I was extremely happy with it.
Yeah. Yeah. But with her, we'll naturally talk about the single most popular and greatest character in all of Baldur's Gate, which is Minsc.
The flagship character.
Yeah, I got criticized for talking bad about Minsc once. I didn't even say anything that bad, but it was like, how dare you?
Yeah, you just said I didn't enjoy the character.
Yeah.
And that was enough.
Yeah. So for context, in the original Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, Rangers were horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Horrible. Because you can't...
And Minsc didn't feel like he should have been a ranger anyway.
Yeah, he was a berserk ranger, of all things. And he has this high strength. He has this high strength, decent dexterity. You always have to put the gloves of dexterity on for him to get him a decent kind of dexterity. And you can definitely get him into the two-handed swords, which there's plenty of good ones like the Lyacor and things like that. But really,
there's not that many in BG1.
Right.
There's, I think like 2.
Yeah. And so you're really restricted to a bow with him.
Yeah.
And so it just
he's
doesn't
not built for bows.
Right. And then you can't get specialized, because as a ranger, you only can put proficiency in. You can't be a master in
expertise.
Yeah. So you're better off back in the day making something like a fighter and then specializing in archery if that's what you really wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because then you could do a grandmaster of that if you got enough points there.
Yeah.
But Minsc, this is the reason why I said that a lot of times people don't like him, and the old school players don't like him because they'll make up, like, yeah, he's a bit annoying. And he can be, because it's the same thing when you play the game over and over and over and over and over before multiple playthroughs. His little sayings kind of get annoying. But apart from that, again, you can't really use him that well in combat. So that's why he's not in a lot of, even though he's well beloved and he's got the boo and, he's as a companion in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, he's more interesting than one of the other companions because of his little quirks. But in Baldur's Gate 3, I think they were coming at it from a perspective of fan service, and they had an interesting character that they tried to make even more interesting, but they kind of overstretched. Like they took the Play-Doh and stretched it out too thin.
I think that is exactly it. So I think all of that I agree with. I think I wasn't a huge fan of Minsc in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. He's an extremely likable character. I enjoyed the personality, but he's just not great in combat, and he's not built in a way that makes sense. He's a berserker ranger. Melee ranger. It's in the name. It's range. That's what they do best, and Minsc is terrible at it. Why was he not just a barbarian? Because Barbarian was a subclass of fighter at that point. But yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of him mechanically, but the character was super fun. Had a lot of those like comedic effects as well as being just, the like we're gonna get butt kicking for goodness. Like he was that hero with a little bit of silliness thrown in. It was wonderful. And then when you get him in Baldur's Gate 3, it feels so much like fan service. Like there's not much else going on with Minsc. It's just, hey, look, Minsc is in the game. Like that's where you land with that. And you can rebuild him with withers. You can take him back to camp and fix him. But I enjoy that he's there. I don't know that I needed him as a companion. If he were one of those people who hung out in camp and just talked to me when I went back, I'd be okay with that. I don't really bring him along with me. And you get him so late in the game that it's just like, I have my party. I mean, we're level 11 when we met you. I wasn't missing anything when I got to this point. I don't need a new companion.
Yeah, but what's interesting too is that he's one of the. This is hard from a perspective standpoint because yes, I do believe it's fan service, but there's actually a very significant lore reason why he's in the game. I mean, a lot of times, it's
fan service that was well done.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like a lot of he shouldn't be alive. He should be dead. I had old school players professing this. I'm like, y'all only know the game. You don't know the lore after the game because I'm not referring to like a book specifically, but there was a lot of Dungeons and Dragons manuals and things like that and stuff about Minsc that happened to him after the events of Baldur's Gate 2. And some references are made at Joaquin's Rest in Baldur's Gate 3. There's a statue there, and there's a little note on the back. You have to kind of go around the other way, not where the cows are, the other direction. But there's a little note there that says, someone has stolen our beloved statue. Now he may not have ever been any, but we know that he was a true hero and what he symbolized, even if he wasn't real. But that was Minsc.
It was not a statue.
Yeah. So he became unstatued at some point, and that's how he went missing. So, everybody just thought he was missing, but he was turned into a statue, and somebody erected him, I guess, as a hero of Baldur's Gate, and forgot who he truly was.
I also think there are some. Is it the leader of the Thieves Guild who talks about seeing Minsc as a hero and not even knowing who he was because she used to take shelter under the statue? That's a really touching story in such a brief period of time that like showcases the hero that Minsc always wanted to be, is just helping everyone he possibly could. So I think it is fan service to bring him back, but they did a really good job with it, and they kept the character consistent. But I still don't think I needed him as a companion. If he had all of the same story, if I got that same explanation, and I could go back to camp and talk to Minsc about it, that would be enough for me.
And he's not from Baldur's Gate, and that's the interesting thing, is that he decided to stay despite all. Now, he did do a lot of other traveling stuff after the events of Baldur's Gate 2, but he did stay in that general area. So he ended up originally showing up in.
What happened to Aerie? His new witch.
Well, we need to find Quail. By finding Quail, we'll find Aerie. Uncle Quail. But
I don't want to fight Quail.
Well, and to rewind it a little bit further, the reason why he's even in this area is because the events of Baldur's Gate 1, he's with Jaheira. And Jaheira is somebody he's protecting as his witch. And she was sent by the council or whoever in Rashomon that the prognosticators have said something is going on in the Sword Coast with the events that are going to play a deity type shape shifting thing going on in the world. In the world, the fortune of the world is moving or whatever. So she's in that area.
Disturbance in the force.
A disturbance in the force. I guess that's a better way of putting it. So she was sent there, and Minsc is there to protect her. And
great job, Minsc.
Yeah, well, that disturbance is our character, is our main character in Baldur's Gate 1, which is interesting because she doesn't recognize it when it's in front of her.
Yeah.
She's just telling you, hey, look, I thank you for saving me. And, obviously Minsc brought you. It's a really good story. So Minsc is great at that early, like level 2, 3, 4. And then after that, because the skill set. But yeah, the story is really good.
Great.
Yeah, Dynahair's great.
Especially if you're, a good aligned party, she's your mage. If you're not playing as one, I think she's the only good aligned mage in the game. So Minsc is along with you because you want Dynahair. Yeah.
And if Minsc dies somehow, then she'll stay.
Yeah.
But if you remove one, then the other one remove. Exactly. Yeah. So if he gets turned to a statue in the Basilisk area, she can stay. So, which
only there were a way to undo that, or like a companion whose exact story is that they got turned to stone, and you recruit them by fixing it.
Yeah, but somehow is attributed to the saving of Baldur's Gate, even though the events happened before that. But yeah. Anyway, but I guess there is a basilisk in Baldur's Gate City in the warehouse, so maybe that's where. Who knows?
Well, I was actually thinking not Minsc from Baldur's Gate 3. I was thinking Bronwyn from Baldur's Gate 1.
Yeah.
She's a statue in the circus at Nashkel, and if you turn her back, if you cure her petrification, she joins you.
Right. Well, no, that's what I was saying is that like if Minsc turned to a statue, and that's consistent with the lore, the story of how he. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that sets that up for the events in Baldur's Gate 3. But again, that's the whole reason why he's there. But he chose, and this is, I guess I'm coming full circle, he chose to stay in that area. And, one, he was a statue, but he was, he chose to kind of stay in the area even after Dynahair had passed away. So anyway, I think he's a really interesting character. Plus, there's a lot of references to the astral stuff in Baldur's Gate 3, and Boo is a miniature space hamster, and there was all this like, is he really a hamster? Is he not a hamster? Blah blah blah. Well, they finally put out a manual on the astral monsters just before Baldur's Gate 3 got released, and it actually addresses miniature space hamsters in basically the exact way that Minsc was trying to describe them. So there's regular space hamsters, which are the size of bears.
Yeah, but giant space hamsters. Yeah. And then miniaturized giant space hamsters.
Yeah. So wizards, in their infinite wisdom, liked them, so they decided to make them pocket-sized. And that, most of the time, made them super intelligent. And that's why they're able to mind speak. And nobody else can hear Boo but Minsc. But he's not crazy.
It is funny when you have Jaheira around and she interacts with Boo, because it seems like she's starting to learn, but it's probably just that she's been around this for so long that she's just like, I might as well lean into it and just pretend I know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so now we actually have a lore-defined reason of what is going on with Boo, and that's really great, because Boo is not an insignificant character. I mean, you bring Minsc along, you're going to have Boo. But also Boo kind of shows up in Mass Effect. From the very beginning, you have the little hamster that you can get, a space hamster. It's a direct reference to Baldur's Gate. Yep. So it's pretty neat. So if
I think that's something we talked about in those episodes where we talked about Mass Effect and just lore in general, is those things you see branch across games, where it's developers of one game who were fans of another put a little Easter egg in there.
Yeah.
Just makes for a more enjoyable experience for everybody.
Yeah, and the Citadel DLC, when you find the hamster thrown into the trash, his cage, and Shepard finds him. Just hang tight, little buddy. Stay low, and remember, go for the eyes. And so you can't tell me that's not a direct reference.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm lastly going to go over. Got to be one of my
your real favorite companion.
I love capital Love Minthara. Love Minthara.
It is so funny that Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 you had Vicky, so Legion had his drow, and then Baldur's Gate 3 you get a crappy version of Vicky. But don't worry, Legion still has his drow.
Yeah, Minthara is a Oath of Vengeance paladin, and what I love about her is that she couldn't exist in Baldur's Gate 1 or 2 in that model, but because they have these new structured alliances, gives me a reason to like version 5, which I wasn't a huge fan of for the longest time. But then I see like, okay, well, if we can do it for story development, then I'm on board with it. But if it's strictly for like, I mean, how can you have a paladin who just like, oh, okay, well, I'm kind of a paladin. You can't be kind of a paladin. But really, Minthara allows her to be that Oath of Vengeance. That's a perfect description of it, because she sees, and you talk about pragmatic, like Gale, she's very pragmatic. If you talk to her about the camp members, like, what do you think about Halsin? What do you think about Shadowheart? She gives a really good analysis of each one of them. Probably better than we've done.
I mean, she had an advantage being written by the same people who wrote those characters.
Yeah, but she like when she talks about Shadowheart, for instance, it's more like, yeah, I do know the ideas of the Sharites. The problem is that they're just way too strict. And she's coming from Loth, not specifically Loth per se, but that's where she did start from. She understands the world of how Drow and their religion and how they worship and the structure and what is faith versus power. They don't use their faith for power. It's kind of a weird marriage of the two. But she understands all that, and she says, but the poor, Shadowheart, she cannot see that they're manipulating her. And that's the difference. And one day she will have to make that decision and realize that for herself.
Yeah. Spoilers, Minthara.
Oh my goodness. I'm like, but everything Minthara says is 100% right. Everything. Mm-hmm. Like I'm like, well, she's never wrong, but she never puts it in this perspective of like, yeah, you need to listen to me. I'm wiser. I know. She never does that. Not one point.
She is, so I think she is a character that fits that alignment as we understood it from Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. She is an evil aligned character in the sense that she is selfish. She is needlessly cruel. She's not somebody who just wants to go sow destruction in the world. She is willing to do what she has to further her own goals, which puts her on that evil side. But she's not needlessly evil. She's not a caricature. She's not, Disney villain evil where she's evil for evil's sake. And that makes her a companion that can fit in other groups. She's never going to be that companion you see sacrifice herself for the good of others, but she's also never going to be that companion you see just needlessly hurting the people around them. There needs to be a better reason, and that means she can fit in my party because normally I am that boring paragon that's like, no, we need good aligned characters. I don't want to risk having an evil aligned character who's telling me I'm doing stuff wrong because I helped people. She's just gonna be like, as long as we get something out of it, as long as this gets us closer to our goal, I'm on board. And she, like you said, she has that very keen insight into what our goals should be and what is really going on. And I think, unfortunately, that insight came at a pretty significant cost in her story, where she basically had to be more or less sold into service to the Absolute. And through your actions, you managed to free her from that influence and recruit her. But she is still very much the kind of the same thing we saw with Astarion. She is seeking that power to make sure she's never a victim again. And that's something that needs some counterbalancing in the way that I play. But she's a very interesting character. She's very capable. Paladins in BG3 are, I'm just doing my own Paladin playthrough again now. They're a lot of fun. They are that weird balance of tank that can also dish out a ton of damage. And she's that. And Oath of Vengeance makes so much sense for her. And the fact that, like, you see her in service to the Absolute, you recruit her, she abandons the Absolute, she returns to her service to Lolth, and never breaks her oath, is something that can only exist in 5th edition rules. Because Paladins don't swear an oath to a god, they just swear an oath. So, in Minthara's mind, she was always serving that oath. She was always staying true to her principles. She was just misled, but she never really truly betrayed who she was. And that makes for an interesting story as well. Somebody who can maintain their sense of self throughout everything she's been through.
Yeah, she's always thinking. She's always looking at not just the bigger picture, but tactically. For instance, like when you save her, when you finish, just before you finish Act 2, she'll make a comment saying, when you save me, because you have to do a few things to get her. It's not just, unless you just play evil. Mm-hmm. If you do a workaround to where you can have her, she'll show up in Act 2 for you. She'll say, why did you save me? Why didn't you just kill me when you had the chance? And then you could say,
I learned you were recruitable.
Yeah. And you could say, well, whatever the reasons are, whatever your options are. But she'll say, yes, but what's her face and what's his nut? They were also, in a position where you could have done this, but you didn't do that with them. You did that with me. I have to wonder
the devs
why.
Didn't develop Gut or Dror Ragzlin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So she's like, she said, so we'll continue. But I have questions.
I found that conversation funny because it is very much that exact reason. It points out almost a failure on the devs' part to establish her as special. It's not until like you loot her body and you're like, oh, she had a camp supply pack. That's something that only companions have. And then, you'll go look it up on the wiki and you're like, oh, she's a companion. I can recruit her. That's not clearly communicated, so you might not know the way to do that workaround.
Yeah, you definitely get the impression that Gut and Ragzlin were sharing power. And to a lesser extent, Ragzlin with Minthara. But at the end of the day, I have no doubt that Minthara was the real leader of that goblin camp.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's even said by some of the goblins in the goblin camp.
Yeah.
Is that like, we follow Ragzlin, but he follows Minthara.
Yeah. Yeah, she's the thinker of the bunch. And that, again, they could have really made that point more significant. I don't think they did, but that should have been a little bit more, because you see her in the cutscene at the beginning where she's looking up with Ragzlin at the scene. She's the one with the plans in her hand, the map in her hand or whatever. She's the mover and shaker. She's the only one in the room. Doesn't have a ton of minions. She doesn't need them.
Yeah.
So I just love Minthara. I just love Minthara. She's right there with Gale Gale, Minthara, me, and somebody. It almost doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
It's you, Shadowheart, Gale, and Minthara.
Yeah, I could see
You
Shadowheart
need
more or
your
less. Yeah,
backup-
yeah, yeah.
Backup main character.
Yeah, that's my normal group. If I was just playing to have fun, for me, probably me as a rogue or some rogue bard thing, and then and bards. I say bard because you got to understand bards are OP in
Mhm.
Baldur's Gate 3.
That
They're just from the beginning to the end.
I sent you a picture of the bard I turned Shadowheart into, and it's fire focused with like a lot of that fire gear, and it's College of the Blades, so she gets proficiency in scimitars, and there's a weapon you can get with a little bit of an exploit. You conjure a fire elemental. I think it's a fire elemental, and then they get arrested. And you can go to the evidence chest and get their weapon. It's called the Sword of Cinder. It is broken. And you can repeat that process and get 2 of them because College of Blades bards are proficient dual wielding. And now Shadowheart is just destroying everything.
Yeah, I told you about there's this little annoying, it's not an exploit necessarily, but in the little temple where you can pray in the city of Baldur's Gate in Act 3, if you steal something, a Jinn will show up, a couple of them, and they have some broken scimitars as well, very similar. But it's like, just they're crazy powerful, and there's 2 of them, so.
Yeah, those are that was actually what I was going for. I was gonna get to those, and then I found this other weapon, and I was like, oh. And there is the Jinn scimitar does poison damage. I think it's like 2d6 poison damage. It's a lot. Might even be more than that. But there's equipment that's built around doing poison as well, which could also work for this build. But there's that kind of so that's incredible. So if you grabbed some of the poison gear and some of the fire gear, either one of those builds on a bard, you can handle a lot just with that one character.
Yeah. Well, like I said, bards, I don't know why they made them so overpowered, but they are.
Yeah.
They just are. So, and plus, I mean, I love having the ability to persuade and have those conversation options.
I think it is a little interesting in the way that the game is designed, because I feel like a charisma focused main character makes for the best playthroughs, just because your character has the ability to do persuasion, deception, performance, intimidation, and those are the things that your main character needs in those conversations. So it works, and bards get proficiency in most of those as well. So
and you can usually play to your
better.
advantage. Plus, you get some cantrips like friends. You can use it for situational a lot more than
friends. And minor illusion are like critical for me in Act 1. Minor illusion, you can isolate a single enemy and take them out, and then just work your way through the entire goblin camp without even raising an alarm. There's just suddenly no one left.
Yeah. If I can do the Minthara without raising the alarm everywhere, just cast silence at the door, then most of the time I can kind of bottleneck everybody into the Minthara area. And then I do draw Ragslin from the rafters. I just put a bottle of smoke barrel or oil or something up there, because that's a metal ladder that goes up. And so I just get all of them to kind of go up that way. And once I do, it just, they're all dead. So it's one shot. But anyway, I think we covered them all. So yeah, it's too bad we don't have a dwarf companion.
Yeah, I did think that was a little disappointing. There's no gnome, no halfling, no dwarf.
Yeah,
Oh,
because we
Dragon
could have
Force.
definitely recruited. What's his nut? The guy at the windmill.
Marcus.
Marcus. He's with you potentially the whole game. I don't know what he'd bring to the table. Don't know what his class would be. Thief, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah. Druid. Watch him be another druid.
You get him at the end of Act 2.
Yeah. So in three druids. So if you're a druid, I could just have my 4 druid party.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate you being here, Banana, and then we'll check you guys later, and check the Discord for any, live announcements or whatever else we got going on. Banana always posts some free games on there, which there's been plenty lately. There's been a ton. Check them out. Right about Star Wars time, there was a lot of free stuff on Prime for Star Wars games. Like I think the Lego Anakin series was,
Lego.
yeah.
Definitely one of them I grabbed that.
Yeah, check that out. So we'll check you later. Take care. Bye-bye.